Hello everyone, welcome back to Matt French Cars. In today's video, I'm gonna be removing and refitting a front suspension struts on this Peugeot 407 SW. So the reason why I want to replace my front struts is because when I'm driving on the motorway, I get slight instability, and also when I'm taking a turns, the car seems to dip more to one side than the other. Same thing with a braking. When I brake hard, the driver's side front seemed to dip much lower than a passenger side, and it should be quite, same on the both sides. So I believe my driver side front strut is actually failing. Another thing I've done this morning is I went around the car, I pressed the corners of the car, and the rear seemed to be absolutely fine. The front passenger side seemed to be fine. The front driver side, when you press the corner of the car there, it seemed to be making all sorts of squeaky sounds and stuff like that, which shouldn't really be there. And another last sign I've had is when I drive through potholes and speed bumps and stuff, driver side corner seemed to make knocking a little bit. So I do believe driver side strut is slowly failing, and my MOT is coming up, so I'm not gonna risk it. I'm just gonna replace the front struts and make you guys a video on how to remove and how to refit, in case you want to do it, in case maybe you want to put the lowering springs on your struts, or whatever reason you have behind watching this video. But end of the day, I have these two struts I took out of a low mileage Peugeot 407 last year, and I know they're up to scratch, they've been tested, they are good struts. So we're just gonna be taking out the ones from my car and refitting these ones here. So I'm gonna be showing you how to do this job and to save your time on one side, and I will actually be doing it on both sides, but I'm gonna be recording just the passenger side because the procedure on the both sides is basically the same, and that's gonna save us some filming time and also for you some watching time. And once you know how to do one side, you know how to do both sides, so that'll make sense, I think. Right, my guys, so before we crack on with a job now, just something for your own safety: pull your handbrake, make sure your car is on a flat surface, and just pull your handbrake properly, make sure the car doesn't roll backwards. And I also gonna put this little body here under one of my rear wheels, make sure it definitely doesn't roll backwards or anything like that. So now I'm just gonna take off my wheel bolts caps and untighten my wheel bolts slightly. Then I will be jacking up my car so that my front wheel is about 1 centimeter in the air. And you jacking up your car on your jacking up points. As you can see, the front wheel is spinning a little bit now. Now I'm gonna be removing my wheel nut bolts. I removed my wheel bolts. What I want to do, I want to press this middle cap from the inside to outside, so that it comes out like this. Once my wheel is off, I'm just going to be removing this little clip here. One looks like this, and removing this little cap here. Then I'm going to be putting my wheel back on. Only with about 3 nuts. Okay, then I'm gonna be releasing my car back on the front wheel. And now with a wheel back on the floor, with a middle cap removed and 35mm drive shaft nut visible, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use this 35mm socket, go over it, and as you can see here, I construct myself some extra support with a little brick and the same jack, so I would have more leverage. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna untight this drive shaft bolt, and as soon as it's untight a little bit, then it will turn fairly easy. There we go. So we can actually undo this as much as we can. Now with the wheel stationary, normally you can just take it and undo it by hand. It's that easy. There we go. That's your drive shaft nut off. With the drive shaft nut off, I can now jack up my car and put it on an axle stand on the side. And land it on an axle stand. I'm gonna remove my jack now. And I can remove these wheel nuts and take a wheel off now. Now I'm gonna go inside the car and turn my steering wheel to the opposite side of the car from which I'm working on. As you can see, what it done, it exposed this track rod end for us, and next thing we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be removing this 19mm nut off the track rod end. For 19mm track rod end nut, we're gonna be using 19mm socket, and we're gonna turn it a bit. Okay. Now it should come off fairly easy if it's a good track rod end. There we go, and nut 19mm nut of a track rod end is off. To remove the track rod end once the nut is off from here, I would suggest to get something like this. Is like a little ball joint kind of extraction tool, and then what you have to do is you have to manage to grip it onto something so that you can apply pressure from the hub onto this thread and push it out. That's the only really safe way to do it. There's a few ways to do it. You can also try to kind of knock on here, but then you can damage the thread, so I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend something like that, which actually does the job properly. And for some reason these bits doesn't go under my ball joint, but hopefully that'll be enough now to actually to push it out. There we go. That's lovely. Actually just popped with a bare minimum of effort when you use a proper tool. And as you can see here, the track rod end is out of the hub, so we can just leave that on the side and carry on with other stuff. The next thing we're going to be doing, we're going to be removing a 24mm drop link nut, which is basically securing our bottom of a strut into the suspension leg as well. And it's located just here, as you can see. And what we want to do here is we're going to be using a T30 TORX key to actually stick it in the middle of it later on and hold it in place, while we've been using 24mm spanner to undo the nut. But in the beginning you want to unloose the nut a little bit, so you're going to be using a ratchet with 24mm head on it just to loosen it up a little bit. And here we go. I'm just gonna lose it up a little bit. Normally these nuts, they just spin in place. It would be ideal if it's not the case. If you're gonna see it, as you can see, it's coming off without me even putting my T30 TORX key in it. But in most of occasions you have to put T30 TORX key in the middle of it and then undo this nut. So I'm just undoing it, and hopefully all of it is gonna come out, but I cannot be sure. So therefore you would put T30 TORX tool in it and then use a 24mm spanner to actually undo it like this, if it does struggle and it does turn in place. See, this ABS sensor is getting in the way a little bit, so what you can do, you can actually just move it off the way a little bit, tiny bit like this, so then it kind of helps you out a little bit. And I'm surprised because it does actually come off quite easy, so that's a good sign. Okay, well, it looks like it's coming off quite easy. Okay, look at that. So that is your 24mm that's your 24mm nut off the bottom of your strut, which is basically the nut which goes on a drop link which goes through the bottom of your strut. So once that one is off, we're gonna take a bottom one as well. So now we're gonna undo the 19mm nut securing a bottom of a drop link in place. Try to show you as best as I can. I hope you can see it. So I'm just gonna be undoing this anti-clockwise. Sometimes it comes off easy and sometimes it doesn't. I just kind of put my finger on the back to feel it, if it turns in place or not, because if it does, then I have to put something here, and if it doesn't have nothing here, sometimes the new drop links, they have a place for a key on the other side here. And hopefully it comes off like that. Just keep our fingers crossed. Okay, so 19mm bottom of a drop link bolt came out easy. Now we're gonna be doing, what we're gonna be doing now is we're gonna be pulling out this bottom of a drop link out of its place. So as you can see, I placed my jack just under the very bottom of the hub. There is a little kind of teeth. You place your jack under it and keep jacking up the suspension leg up until you can easily pull out your drop link out of a place. So we're gonna do that. Just gonna be jacking this up a little bit. While I'm jacking it up, as you can see, the drop link leveled up and you can easily pull it out of the place. Now we can release our jack. Alright my guys, so we're just gonna pop the hood now and gonna go under the bonnet and do the job required in order to be able to undo our top of the strut nuts. As you can see, there is a plastic covers, so in order to remove these plastic covers to access the top of the strut nuts, we're gonna have to remove the wipers and this scatter panel and also these top of the strut covers. Right, my guys, so now in order to remove your wipers from your Peugeot 407, you have to use what I'm using, 16mm head on the ratchet. I believe some of the 407s have 14 or 13mm nuts on here. I can't remember now, but either way, you do it anti-clockwise. So 16mm nut in this case. Right, my guys, so I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm gonna be using this wiper arm removal tool in order to remove my wiper arm. So I'm just gonna be positioning it and removing. Before you do that, you can also try and, you know, try to take it off your wiggle it, your wiper arm, and try to remove it like that. But most of the time, they're literally stuck on this place, and this kind of tool is probably one of the best tools to use for this kind of procedure. So I'm just gonna adjust this tool, place it in place, make sure it's up for the job. Okay, and it does look good so far, so hopefully it does the job. Never used these before, to be honest, something new to me, but right. Okay. Right, this is proving to be difficult. I'll go myself a little help. And here you go. I actually popped it off, surprisingly, but guess what? I think this tool is £7 for a reason, because not gonna lie, what do we have here? Did the job, but with a little thing which I didn't expect, is this bit here actually bended. So as you can see, sometimes things don't go right up to the plan. Nevertheless, we're gonna straighten that and do another one, because you're gonna need to remove both of the wiper arms in order to be able to remove the scatter panel. So we're gonna remove this wiper off now, once it's popped, and just put it on the side somewhere. I'm just gonna be undoing this wiper arm as well. $14mm nut off, which actually fold in there, but we're gonna be able to take it off once scatter panel has been removed. And here we go. That actually removed it once again. So apart from this bit, which actually is not that quality made, the thing is still doing a job end of the day, so that's a good news. So we're gonna remove this wiper arm as well. There we go, and just put it somewhere away. And now we can remove this rubber seal here. Just removing it, and the scatter panel, we can literally pick it up. Just one thing to be careful with is these little bits here. It pulls out from under it. Just be careful And then normally it just comes off easy, but sometimes it's proper stuck into these sides here where it's supposed to be stuck really. So we'll see how that goes. Right, my guys, so once the wiper is off, scatter panel is off, you have this top of a strut mount cover, and what you want to do is first use T30 TORX key and undo the screw here on the side anti-clockwise. So T30 TORX screw, and then we're gonna be proceeding taking off these 2 13mm nuts. So now to undo the 13mm nut here and here, you use a 13mm socket. One here, and another one is a bit hidden, but not hidden that much, is actually here. So the same procedure. Once these 2 13mm nuts are removed, you can actually wiggle your strut cover, top cover, out of a place, but beware, sometimes on the side here this metal is clipping onto the plastic, onto the strut top cover. You just have to kind of pull it, but be careful not to break. So we're going to be using a 13mm socket on the little extension and a ratchet to undo the 13mm nuts, top of a strut nuts. Once this undone a little bit, it seems to come off quite easy. This one might not need no extension on this one. Right, with all your 3 13mm strut nuts from the top undone, we're gonna go back in the bottom and do preparation in order to remove the old strut. Right, so we are at the bottom of suspension leg again, where we have this bolt and nut securing suspension leg in place as well. So from one side we have a 18mm nut, and from other side we have a, as you can remember probably, 16mm bolt here. So I'm gonna be holding onto this bolt with a ratchet and 16mm socket, while I'm gonna be undoing the other side 18mm nut with a spanner. And sometimes it's easier to actually do turn the nut rather than turn the bolt rather than a nut, and either way, this is how it's undone. It comes off quite easy. Right, so 18mm nut is off the bolt. So once that is achieved, what we can do now is actually make sure our drive shaft is not stuck in the hub. So what we need to do now is we need to make sure the drive shaft end here is not stuck in the hub. So I'm using this rubber end of my hammer because I don't want to damage the tread on it. I just give a little knocks, and as you can see, there is a little movement, so that means it's not actually stuck into the hub. So we are good to go and proceed. Right, so what I want to do here now is I want to use like a TORX key or something, so I can first knock on here a little bit, make sure that it's in, and I'm gonna stick this nice and slidey TORX key instead of this bolt for time being. in the place of it. And as you can see, what I have here, I have my TORX key stuck in it, holding it still in place, while my bolt has been removed now. I'm just going to put it to the side. And now what we're going to be doing is, while I'm holding this drive shaft in place with my belly really, and the little hammer end, I'm going to be slowly removing a TORX key and pulling a suspension leg towards me. So I removed the TORX key now. I'm applying the pressure with my belly, and now I can slide this a little bit backwards like that. And what I want to do now is preferably use something like maybe this little bit here or something to actually push my drive shaft even further down. While pulling the suspension leg towards me. So that makes sure, then I'm gonna grab the CV joint from this side, and while pushing, I hope you can see guys, it's difficult to film really, while pulling suspension leg still towards me, I make sure my drive shaft stays in the same place, because if I pull it out of a gearbox, the gearbox oil will be released, and then we're gonna have a job to refill the gearbox oil again, release it, refill it, you know how it goes. So what I want to do here is I prepare myself now, same drive shaft nut, and what we're going to be doing here is actually going to be pulling drive shaft out a little bit like this. We're gonna hold this here and put a drive shaft bolt on the end here. I don't know if you can see it now, difficult to film it. Hope you can see it. So I'm putting a drive shaft nut back on the drive shaft, and because I'm really scared to damage the thread, because if you damage this thread you're gonna likely have to change the CV joint. So this in place, I can just bend it actually towards the suspension leg like this, and because it's with a nut on, I know it's not going to damage my thread, and because of the pressure of a suspension leg, it will keep my drive shaft in place. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm just gonna make my life a bit easier with this 13mm socket on a ratchet. I'm just gonna undo this nut bolt actually here, securing a brake fluid pipe in place on a suspension leg. The reason for it is because the strut is actually gonna come through this side, so you just want to undo this bolt and wiggle this one out of the place like that, so it has a bit more play in it, and we can remove the strut through the side. What we're going to be doing now guys is we're going to be actually removing a drop link from the bottom of the suspension leg, securing a strut in place. I'm going to use the same tool which goes in the bottom, in the middle of it, and a little hammer. You see us here, I'm using a T30 I believe is it. Right, so once the drop link is removed, there's nothing really securing a strut in place, so we're just gonna remove the strut. So what you can do now is just literally take something rubber and just knock on here a little bit. Well, here we go, that's a bit of a rough way. You can also use like something like that or whatever, but either way, job has to be done and I need to get it done quick, so I just use the rubber bit of hammer to knock this strut out of its place a little bit, and now the strut is coming off nicely through the side here, as it should. Here we go. So this strut is out now, and we're gonna be replacing it with one of these boys. So now we're gonna be inserting replacement strut in a place. Same place. I'm gonna be inserting it through here. Get this out of the way a little bit. It's not the best place to work on. Through the bottom you can see the match-up holes. So that's what we want to do. We want to match up holes a tiny bit. As you can see in the top it looks like this. And what we want to do, we want to catch at least one of them threads in the top with a 13mm nut. So I'm just going to lift the strut up a little bit and just catch this one, let's say just here, tiny bit, so that it stays in a correct place. And the hardest part is to actually match up the holes here in order to put the bottom, to put your drop link back in. So we're gonna do our absolute best and get it done. And this is not an easy part, but that's something you have to do. So sometimes you have to push suspension leg with yourself a little bit down and just match up these holes. Make sure this goes in nicely and stays there. Right, so to catch up the hole here, I'm gonna be using something like this TORX key, and I'm gonna be trying to position this shock that it goes nicely in the place it's supposed to go. And hopefully that's gonna happen. And sometimes you need to give a couple of knocks from the back, kind of just to have a bit lined up better, but then the rest you can just do with your eyesight, like this, and then just try to match them holes up really well in order to put your new or used drop link in the place. Right, so with your hole lined up, as you can see, you're not gonna have no problem really of inserting a drop link into the place. I'm gonna move this a little bit like that, but you can see I'm pushing in the drop link and drop link goes in. So we're just gonna push this drop link all the way through and then carry on from there. So first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna pull the suspension leg towards me a little bit, and I'm gonna be undoing this drive shaft nut and sticking a drive shaft back in this place. So as you can see here, just a tiny bit pulling it off, undoing a nut, and then sticking a drive shaft in a hole where it's supposed to go. And I'm gonna be pushing drive shaft, while sometimes you have to give a little spin a little bit just to kind of line up the thread here. And so we're gonna be pushing it, and we're gonna be trying to stick that bottom suspension leg bolt in place as well. So first, well, it needs to line up the drive shaft, then give it a good push. Once the good push is there, the drive shaft starts to actually come out through here, as you can see, and it looks like it's right in a place, and it's almost in a place. As you can see, the bottom after a good push is nearly lined up as well, but the bolt hole is not lined up. So we just have to use a flat screwdriver or something to move this bit down a little bit from this bit and stick the bolt through. So I'm just going to show you what I'm doing here. I need to stick this bolt through this hole here. In order to do that, I have to keep pressing my wheel hub. I stick my screwdriver here somewhere and just kind of do like this to match the hole up a little bit. Sometimes it can be a bit of a pain, but here we go.
the bolt is through now. So this nut goes on first, then 18mm nut here. Actually, I'm confused here. Here we go. That's the nut. 18mm nut goes on here, and then we're gonna be holding it with 18mm spanner while we're gonna be doing it up from other side as a bolt with a 16mm head and a ratchet. So I just do this up a little bit, and then I'm gonna be doing it up properly from other side. I'm not sure if you're gonna be able to see well here. I hope you will. I'm holding this in place. So with this bottom suspension bolt done up properly, we're gonna crack on and do the other bolts. You can put this 35mm nut on here first. Make sure it goes on nicely, make sure you didn't damage the thread or something, and just we're gonna just do it up, and we're gonna tighten it up in a bit. Now we're gonna be jacking up the whole hub. So as you can see here, once again I'm jacking up the hub a little bit like this. The reason I'm doing that, because as you can remember, I need to stick my drop link back in a place. So I'm waiting for it to actually line up with this hole. Here we go. Oh, not yet. I think that will do. And as you can see here, the drop link goes in nicely where it's supposed to. Now I can put a nut here. I believe it's this nut. It looks quite new, and my drop link has been new. So I'm just gonna try that. Yeah, that's the same 19mm nut on. So I just put that on the place for now. And I'm gonna tighten it up in a minute. But because the suspension leg has been jacked up quite high to match the drop link hole, what I can do now, actually, I can go back to the top and do up my two remaining 13mm nuts here on the top of a strut, as the strut top is at the moment pushed towards this top of the suspension leg. So I'm gonna grab myself a spanner and just do them up a little bit. Right, so just do them up clockwise and not too hard. Just do them up until it starts to get a bit hard. I don't know exact torque setting, I couldn't find it in the Helm's manual, so I'm just doing them up. Well, there, do up, but you don't want to do them up too much, because at the moment it's already pressed as much as it goes up with a jack from under the suspension leg. So if you over tighten these up, what's gonna happen is either this thread is gonna snap, or I don't even know, you could just damage the thread or not. So just one thing to show, this car has a new drop link, and as you can see, new drop links not necessarily has a hole here in a end of a thread to hold it in place while you're doing this 19mm up with either TORX key or hex key. Some of them have a place for a tool, such as the 17mm spanner on a side here, so when you do it up you can just hold it on that, and I think that's quite useful, because I rather have that, because these holes in the back usually worns out and gets rusty, and the tool inside of it starts spinning in a place, and then what it does, it just, you know, you have to cut it off at some points, and that's the thing what happens, and it's just not something you want to do. So we're just going to be doing up this 19mm line here. Right, so with a bottom of a drop link done up, we can proceed and do up the top of a drop link, which is basically sticking out through here. As you can remember, 24mm nut. Alright, so we're just gonna use a 24mm spanner and hope that the thread is not gonna spin in place or anything. Drop link is quite new, so that would be quite unusual. You never know. But anyway, let's do it up. If it does start to spin in place, we're gonna have to use a spanner instead and hold it in a place with a key of TORX T30, I think, or T35 TORX key in the middle of it. So far so good. So top of our drop link, which comes out through the bottom of a strut and suspension leg, is now being done up with 24mm bolt nut. So now the next thing we can do is we can actually place this back where it's supposed to be, just here, and we're gonna use that 13mm bolt and secure this one back in place as well. And that is done. Now you can tuck your ABS sensor in place here as well if you needed to move it a little bit to the side. And the only thing left, well, not the only thing left here, but next thing to do would be a track rod end back in its place and the 19mm nut done up on it. So we have this 19mm nut, as you remember, it goes on the bottom of a track rod end. You need to do it up really well, this one, because you don't want this to be undone when you're driving. It's pretty much same like any other, but you know, it's one of them things. When you do suspension nuts and bolts, you have to make sure everything is done properly, because if something does come off while you're driving, that'll be quite an experience and probably cause you a big accident. Okay, so with track rod end not secure, we're gonna crack on, and sometimes I have to undo this one a little bit, so just use something just to press it in a little bit, so make sure it doesn't touch the alloy wheel once you put it back. Right, and now with all the bolts and nuts back in place, we can release the jack here. And remove it. We're going to be putting a wheel back on and tighten up this 35mm nut. Alright, so we're just going to be putting a couple of wheel nuts back in place. As you can see, still with a cap off. I think we're going to put one more in. And then we're going to be lifting a car up and removing this jack so that the car sits on the tire again. And stop. Alright, as you can see, my guys, I have the same setup. I used a little brake, used my jack and 35mm socket with quite an extension, so I would have a better, you know, leverage over the nut. And what you want to do is you want to tighten it up proper. Sometimes the best way to step on it a little bit, just to make sure nice and tight. Beautiful. Once it's nice and tight, that's what you want. You can see the wheel is in the air. Now, with the tire out of the way, what we can do is we can put this secure clip back on. It's this way, sometimes you have to adjust, and then you have to install the secure clip right this way. So just give it a little tap like this, and if it sits like that, well, that's the way it's supposed to sit. All we need to do now is we can put the wheel back on, let the car back on the floor. Right, so we're gonna do all the wheel nuts up now. Okay, and then we release the jack from under the car, lifting up the side. And then we're just gonna be tightening up these wheel nuts using our 17mm wheel tighten up tool. Before wheel nuts tight up, we can just put our wheel caps back on. There we go. So the bottom is all sorted, as you can see. Now for the top bit, once both of your front suspension struts, or if you've been doing work on only one, has been done, you need to install this top of the strut cover back in. So it just goes in nicely like this, claps on, and then what we're going to be doing, we're going to be securing these two 15mm nuts here. And one, as you can remember, one goes here. Alright, so we just use extension on this one, just tighten up nicely, and then extension on that one. That's it. And don't forget your, I believe it was T30 TORX screw, which goes in a hole here. As you can see, that's the location. It goes in a hole there. We're just gonna tighten up that. And with this screw done up, what you would be able to do now is you would be able to put your scutter panel back in place. So to put scutter back panel in a place, make sure that those ends goes under these side trims, right? And then the things here, they tuck in an actual place like that, so that there is no gap here by the window. So we're gonna do this side as well. Make sure it tucks in nicely. And as you can see, my one, you can hear a click. Everything tucks in the way it should be. Is all nicely here. and all nicely on the side, and clips in as well. As you can see, you could hear it, everything clips in and stays in the same place. Then we can install our rubber seal. Oh, sorry, rubber seal goes just there. I'll try to position my camera to film it proper. Right, so rubber seal, it goes in like this up to here, and then nicely goes into the metal here. So the other side as well, it just tucks nicely in. And that is rubber seal and scatter panel back in. The only thing we have left to do now is just to install our wipers. Right, my guys, so as you can see here, what I've done next is I have literally put wiper arms back on the treads from electric wiper motors. I've done it on this side and this side, and I'm gonna be now putting a 16mm nut back on it and tighten it up. Proper nice and tight. And now we are done, and the wipers are installed back in the place where they should be. So now with both wiper arms back in place, the only thing I would say you want to do is just close your bonnet and then just go quickly inside the car. Just make sure the wipers are placed in the places correct. So as you can see, yeah, everything is fine. So with that done, out of the way, old struts removed and the new in place, the job is officially done. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you're gonna subscribe my channel, and yeah, make sure you click the like button as well, please.